the justice system. First, from the State Prosecutor's Office, we have Mr. Daniel Logan. Mr. Logan, bring it on close. And then we have the Chief, Mr. Wilfredo Campos, from here in the city of Wilmington. Mr. Jack McDonough, retired Chief, U.S. Probation Office, and just from the District Court of Delaware, so understands. Mr. Mike K.O. Bartley, founder of Heads Up 302. And Mr. Sean Winetta from Reform Alliance. So, would like to give you the same opportunity that everyone else has. Some of your positions are self-explanatory, but others would like to know about your organization. We can start from this end.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Winetta. I'm Policy Manager for the Eastern Region at Reform Alliance. I've been in this role for a very short period of time. Prior to this, for a couple of years, more than 2 years, I was a policy strategist at the ACLU of Virginia, and I am actually 3 weeks from today will be my 4 years home from prison after serving 16 years. The Virginia Department of Corrections on a 30-year sentence, and like my friend Sincere Law received a pardon from Governor Northam. Came about 2 years ago, me just about 4 years ago. Thank you, sir.
Yes, my name is Jack McDonough. I'm retired chief from the U.S. Probation Office here in Delaware. I've had different functions, but that's what I identify most with, and what I'd like to share my experiences there as it relates to this topic here, by trying to move institutional change.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael K.O. Bartley.
Michael.
I'm the founder of Heads Up the 302. Heads Up the 302 has an acronym that says healthy, encouraging attitudes, designing solutions. And the up is what we see right now in this room, uniting the people. And I'm also the vice president of Home Team Chosen Ones, which is a statewide organization, Sussex, Kent, and Newcastle County, formerly incarcerated men who are out here doing the work and trying to, be agents of change.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Logan. I currently serve as the state prosecutor here in Delaware. Confusing title, but essentially the state prosecutor is head of the entire criminal division underneath Attorney General Kathy Jennings. Returned to the state. I've been here for about 18 months in this current role. Oversees 250 employees in the criminal division. It's 125 criminal attorneys in all 3 counties. All 125 of them are alpha prosecutors. They tend to be of a certain justice-driven way that I think that we are talking about when we talk about institutional change. Some of those things, I look forward to talking to you about how we are collectively trying to reimagine how we are training and developing our prosecutors in the state. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Chief?
Good afternoon, everyone. I think the uniform gave it away of who I am. I've been on the police department for going on 28 years. I was appointed the 33rd Chief of Police for the city of Wilmington in January of 2023 by Mayor Prosecution. Everything I do upon my appointment, and even growing up in the police department, is with the focus on community. So I thank you all for having me here. I'll talk about some of the changes that I made upon being appointed. And one of the things we always know is that we do traditional police work, right? But we have to, and this is a great title, reimagining how we respond to what the community needs. And I'll talk about some of the things that we put in place in the last 2 years and things that we want to continue as we go forward. So thank you.
Thank you. So just to keep everyone on pace for today's discussion, it's a discussion around the prosecution, prison, probation, and parole that will highlight reorienting the use of imprisonment only for high-risk offenders and reinventing the cost savings and correction practices that have proven their effectiveness in reducing recidivism and holding offenders accountable. So as we're moving forward with that discussion, you made a comment, sir, that you have alpha prosecutors. And I'm big on words, I'm in the word business. So tell me a little bit more about alpha prosecutors and prosecution, because you made it clear that they are justice oriented in regards to the new justice system and what have you. So I'm anxious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I purposely use that word because the people that are in the Department of Justice, in today's world, they come out of law school with lots of debt. And we have our challenges from recruitment to try to get to the very best when they can get paid 3 or 4 times more money working for private firms. So as a typical general matter, all the prosecutors in our office are dedicated public servants because they want to make change, right? They are trying to find their role in the capital J justice, if you will. So when I say the alpha comment is very much it's a product of someone who is trained to go in front of a courtroom, to try to produce evidence, to show whether or not someone has committed a crime in a particular scenario. To do that for a third or a fraction of the pay requires a sense of justice-driven mentality that I think is a good starting point that when we talk about the role of prosecutors or the role of prosecution when we talk about justice and reimagining it, that we start with understand how a lot of the prosecutors and their why. Why are they here, right? Why are we here? Why do I do the things? Why did I decide this line when I could be making a lot more money elsewhere? And my wife asks that question all the time, actually. And the answer is driven back to the fact that we believe that we can make a difference, and we can make it a little bit safer for the victims, and we can bring voices to those who have felt neglected and that there's been some sort of injustice. And we're going to try to help restore that. So there is an honor about prosecutors that is not often portrayed when we see it on the TV shows, perhaps, or in an environment where the community does not necessarily see eye to eye with a particular prosecution. So I hope that answers your question. But that's a good starting point for me to frame what I represent, which is, in general, very dedicated, public service-oriented individuals.
Yeah. So I've pressed the Department of Corrections here as gently as I possibly could in regards to hearing things, seeing things, sending things out, but now it's your turn, Chief. The heat is off them. So in dealing with this, there is no way that you can be successful at your job without, I guess, reimagining justice, but and still enforcing it. Right? So I often said that law enforcement, especially at the police level, from a local community standpoint, you are the judge, jury, and I hate to use the word sometimes, executioner of justice in regards to the community. So finding another way to do that, leveraging programs, understanding the programs in which you're trying to leverage for folks in your community is more of, I would say, the chief's job and at the executive level and kind of vetting that stuff. So I'm interested to know your thoughts.
Yeah, so one of the things I did upon my appointment was bringing back the community policing unit, right? Because it's critical. It's all about relationships. And we go to every civic association meeting throughout the city. And the commander's there, community engagement officers are there, the district officers are sometimes there if they're not on call, to hear firsthand from the community what the issues are. Because every neighborhood in the city is different. Every neighborhood has its own different issues. So if we're not at these meetings, how do we know what the community needs, right? How do we build those relationships? How do we make that connection? And it's really important because it's about accountability as well, right? If we're at the meeting every single month, if we say we're gonna do something, then let's follow up and make sure we do something, because I guarantee you the next month, they're gonna hold us accountable, right? So you build that trust, you build that relationship, that something as simple as someone parking in someone's handicapped parking space can escalate to violence, right? So we try to mitigate that and take care of that before it gets out of control. And the community really loves that. So community policing unit was brought back under my tenure. And then the other thing that I seen was, again, I spoke about traditional law enforcement. Let's think about non-traditional law enforcement. How can we help the community out, right? And that's why in March of 2024, we pushed out the Partners in Care. And that's a program, a partnership between the Wilmington Police Department and Christiana Care. And what we do right now, we have a pilot program where we have 2 mental health clinicians that are partnered with our police officers that respond out to mental health calls and calls dealing with substance abuse and addiction. Because there is a big need in the community for that. So that's one of the ways that we're reimagining, how can we help the community out, right? There's a need for it. I've seen the need for it, that's why I created the Partners in Care program. And then on top of that, everyone here is probably familiar with National Night Out, right? One day a year, these joins the community. But we, about maybe 3 years ago, thought, well, why is it only one night? Why can't we do this throughout the year? And my predecessor started this, and we've expanded on it, is that every week we have a community resource call where we partner with a couple of our medical centers that are in the city to go out and do outreach work, go out to the encampments, go out to the neighborhoods, and reach those individuals who wouldn't normally come to us, or go out and try to get that assistance. And then on top of that, every month we do a community resource fair. We've partnered with over 40 different nonprofit organizations to have a fair at a different community center, or a park if the weather's good, so they can come out and get free services. And I say free because we don't allow anyone to come to our fairs to sell anything. Everything's got to be free to the community. And those are ways that you can reimagine to try to prevent people from doing things such as, breaking into vehicles or committing violence or robbing someone. If we can fill that need that person has by getting them some social services, then we can also reduce the crime rate as well.
I love it. I love the National Night Out on a more frequent level. I think it's important that law enforcement's out in the street. I think we lost a lot when it came to community policing, but that's a whole nother discussion. When community policing kind of went away, bringing it back, I think is strong. But dealing with this from a probation and parole standpoint, reimagining justice, I think you're seeing it firsthand. Although at the federal level, when you had your appointment, you still understood it as a whole. What do you see in regards to reimagining justice?
So I was a state probation officer for 8 years before I was a federal probation officer. And probation officers, frankly, have kind of an identity crisis. They don't know if they're social workers or police officers. I saw that debate rage way back in the 80s and 90s, which really caused a rift between the two groups. And if you really think of it, how in the world could somebody say, well, I'm going to handle this case the way I think is right, by my own intuition? Imagine going to your doctor with a heart problem, and he says, forget the evidence. I know what's wrong with you, and I'm just going to follow my hunch. We run out of the office, right? So a person who guided our system was called Dr. Chris Lowenkamp from the University of Cincinnati. He said, this is around 2006, what we've been doing to that point was tantamount to correctional malpractice. That struck me. Just think of that. And he was right. Now, here's the point I want to emphasize. I can tell that genuine efforts are being made to implement evidence-based practices. But systems are reflexively resistant to change. They want to stay the way they are for some reason or other. Maybe that's human nature, in part. But when I took over as chief, I asked everybody, what are they doing? What function? To list everything they're doing. And if the answer why they do it is just because they always did it, let me have that, and I'll go to the chief judge. And thankfully, we had a very open-minded chief judge. Had to waive that and allow people to focus on the real functions of their job. So a lot of probation officers were reluctant to let go of low-risk cases. Well, not a lot, some. And I guess they were afraid, God forbid something happened, I'll be blamed. But the point is, it was going to happen anyway. We could do more harm than good to low-risk cases. Low-risk prisons do more harm than good. High-risk ex-offenders do respond. I had to direct this particular probation officer not to see his low-risk cases because they know what they need to do. What's the point in bringing them off their job to come in and see? It just causes angst. And the other thing that's really important, is the rapport between a probation officer and the person he supervises. Now, we're not their buddies. We're not social workers. We're not police. We're something in between, a hybrid. But that rapport, studies have shown, makes a difference. I know a pretty high-profile person that confided in some terrible things he was going to do when he got out of prison. And he wouldn't have confided that if he had not had such a close relationship with that, a healthy relationship with that probation officer. I think he saved lives. So we're kind of a complex situation. People don't quite understand what we do, even probation officers. But I do appreciate the chance to speak to this. So what I would say is, before I pass it on, is it's moving in institutions, bureaucracies are difficult. And you need leaders at the top willing to take the heat, say, do this, let go of that case. I have your back. And then do it with fidelity. You just can't say you have risk needs responsivity, CBT. You have to do it the right way.
Yeah, I think doing it the right way is important. And I have to ask you, I don't know when to say KO, or is it just Mrs. Barley? I don't know which one to you.
You can call me KO.
KO.
But it's really okay now, because that's changed my life. So what was the question?
What is your feelings in regards to, and especially incorporating some of the things that you've heard so far on the dais, but in reimagining justice?
Well, for me, my organization, Healthy, Encouraging Attitudes, Design Solutions, the very first word to that is healthy. So we have to have healthy thoughts, we have to have healthy emotions, we have to have healthy desires. If we anticipate a good quality of life for people coming in, going inside the prisons or being inside the prisons, or for the society as a whole. Because right now it's a healing process that needs to be in place. But we all have to be on the same page. If we keep being divided and conquered, and you doing this, you doing it that way, and we're not changing the good old boy system that's been in place for years, you know what I mean? We gotta operate out of love, care, concern, and understanding. And the key to that is understanding. You know what I mean? I'm not the same person I was on paper 20 years ago. You know what I mean? So we can't judge people on that. We gotta get to know people. You know what I mean? That's a lot of the things that's going on with our people. That, you know what I mean? The powers that be, law enforcement. We're not building relationships. We're not understanding that we got to take a humanistic approach. We're all humans. You know what I'm saying? Let me get to know this guy. You know what I mean? Maybe we have something in common. You know what I mean? Instead of judging, instead of putting titles on us. You know what I mean? I was finished doing a lot of time when I was incarcerated. I used to hear about Murder Town, USA. They used to kill me when I was incarcerated. Like, Murder Town, USA? In my city? Where's the leaders at? Where's the community? Where's everybody at? We're supposed to be coming together. But they were trying to make a movie out of this stuff. Murder Town, USA. But yeah, so we just got to go back to the basics, man. The basics from where I came up from is solidarity. You know what I'm saying? My grandparents didn't teach me hate, racism, and all that. We learned that all, when we went out somewhere, on TV and things like that. But now we in a time where we gotta come together. You know what I mean? We can't do nothing, man, if we separated, we different organizations with hidden agendas, ulterior motives. We gotta be on the same page so we can connect the dots and bridge the gap with our elders and these babies. If not, we're gonna be in trouble moving forward.
So the holistic approach, starting with the family, yeah, great comment. But my true love is government and policy. And that comes to, I guess, what the Hope organization is doing currently. What is your ideas? What is your organization going after? We've heard a lot of it today, but specifically, what are some things that you're working on in regards to it? From the reform organization. Sorry.
I'm sorry, like I said, Hope.
Yeah, my fault. My apologies. Long day.
So a lot of it, there's a lot of different ways to approach this, and I'm also a policy wonk. And I'll point to one thing a couple of policy points that I think we should be considering as we do this reimagining of justice. And a lot of it goes to dedicating resources to the people that most need it, and the people that are not needing those resources, putting them in community interventions. Rather than putting them into the system or having law enforcement, relying on law enforcement or probation and parole to police individuals, allow those people to be worked with through community interventions. And one of those models is a justice reinvestment model. It's really a great model that takes the savings from people that are diverted from incarceration or supervision and reinvesting them into programs that reduce recidivism, that transition people from incarceration to supervision and then from supervision into the community, back into the community. And there's a couple of states that are doing it really well. Louisiana is sort of an interesting case of doing it. They've recently passed an initiative that's going to reduce incarceration there by about 10%, as well as people on supervision by about 12%. And that should result in a projected savings of about $262 million. 70% of those savings are dedicated towards being reinvested into community services, into community interventions, programming that also that funds victim services to make sure that we are looking at taking a holistic approach, not just to people that are system impacted, but also that are impacted by trauma and serious crimes that happen in the community. Texas has also followed a similar model, and if you know, Texas and Louisiana, these are hardly bastions of progressive, you know, policies.
Yeah, I wasn't sure that you actually said Texas.
Yeah. So if places like this can do that, and it is creeping into Virginia, I live in Richmond, Virginia. I have worked primarily the last couple of years on policy in Virginia, and it's, you know, Virginia has allowed this justice reinvestment policy to work to their advantage in a lot of different ways. We've reinvested a lot of savings from expansion of earned sentence credits in Virginia, which just happened about 2 years ago. We've been allowed to take a lot of that money that has been saved to reinvest it into programming to make sure that Virginia has maintained their lowest recidivism rate in the country. And one of the big products of that has been not just the earned sentence credit expansion, but another big piece of that puzzle is probation reform. Virginia, a couple years ago, passed a big piece of legislation that allowed people to not be immediately reincarcerated for technical violations, and it also limited the term when somebody could be incarcerated for a second or third violation, so technical violation. So there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that allow for you to reduce incarceration, to have community interventions, or not have probation officers to be in a policing role and perhaps be in more of a supportive role. Because of these policy pieces, and it's not just those two pieces of policy, but those are two big pieces of the pie that's allowed Virginia to lead the nation in decarceration for the last few years. At the same time, we've had a resultant historical drop in the crime rate. And there's a lot of pieces to that. It's not any one factor or any one piece of legislation that you know, creates a historic drop in crime, but those are a few of the pieces. Because of those policies, Virginia's closing 4 prisons this year. We're also taking back control of the one private prison that's in Virginia, primarily, again, because of these pieces of policy. Another interesting piece is that earned sentence credit program has not been fully implemented. Actually, 30 days from tomorrow, it will have its full implementation, and will probably lead to Virginia continuing to lead the nation in decarceration. So these pieces can all work together, and this justice reinvestment model of taking the savings, $178 million will be saved by these 4 prisons closing. You can take those dollars and reinvest them in the community and the people that need the resources the most. And there are a lot of people that are incarcerated right now, and people that are under supervision that we talked about earlier, that are people that we're angry at, maybe not necessarily people that we're scared of, or people that most need the resources that the state has to offer. So the justice reinvestment model really allows those savings to go back into the community, to have community interventions for people that need community interventions, and the people that most need the help from the state or from state agencies, to have those resources most dedicated to them. There was another little piece that I wanted to hit on that just allows, well, actually, I'm stumbling here for a second. The big piece of this, again, is allowing savings from people that are not being incarcerated, or savings that are from people that are being transitioned off of supervision that don't need those resources, to be invested in the people that most need them. And I think that's where a lot of the system fails along the way, is not getting the resources to people that need them, or we're dedicating resources to people that frankly don't need them, or could be served with community interventions, rather than, whether it's law enforcement or prosecutors or probation, dedicating their time to them when they could really be spending their time in the community.
Yeah, and Chief, this question's to you. So for I don't want to call them line officers, but officers that are dealing with the day-to-day in the streets, they're encountering people that may be leaving incarceration, dealing in the street, maybe have a very small interaction with law enforcement. Is the information available, is the training available to officers to give those services? And people don't know, a great deal of law enforcement is social work, a great deal of law enforcement is dealing with juveniles, a great deal of law enforcement is dealing with so many other things that people just don't understand. But is the information available for law enforcement professionals that are in the street there to pass along to folks and guide them and kind of avoid an event?
Yeah, so it all starts in the police academy on how you train your police officers, right? And one of the things we do in Wilmington in our police academy is we bring in members from the community, from a diverse group, right, to speak about different cultural norms, so that the officers, even though they may not come from a certain background, they get to have that understanding. And we continue that training throughout their careers. And one of the reasons why I started the community policing, and also more importantly, the Partners in Care program, is because we're able to offer those resources to individuals who not only are coming out from prison, but people who are in need of social services. We can make that referral to the caseworker that we have back at the police department, and he makes those calls. So if an officer goes out and encounters an individual who is in need, or a family that's in need, whether it's food insecurity or whatever it may be, whether it's a child who is acting out and the parents don't know where to turn to, they are referred to the caseworker, and the caseworker follows up with the family and makes sure that those social service organizations reach out to that family. So that's what we keep pushing in Wilmington, and we hope to expand.
Love it. So also going to the justice side of things, I don't know, where does that play in when you're seeing these gaps? We talked about how the prosecutors are being very active, making themselves known, but at the same time, a lot of this can be handled through programs.
Yeah, so great question. Let me try and answer it this way. Understanding where the prosecutor's role is in the justice system. As a general rule, right, you think of prosecutors, what do you think of? The law and order, the 40 minutes where it all wraps up in one nice little thing. They have that aha moment in the courtroom. Perry Mason, if I want to date myself, right? Like we have this idea of what a prosecutor is. But a prosecutor, as a general rule, gets the case after it's been investigated, right? So sometimes you might have proactive investigations, but for the vast majority of the state cases, the interaction, the bad event, whatever has happened, has already occurred. So when we talk about stretching or reimagining justice, we have to start thinking about, well, first, what is justice currently? And that justice currently, the typical model, right? Crime occurs, police investigate, prosecutors act as a check and or law enforcement partner, but we are a check on the police officers too. Did they do things constitutionally? Did they not? Are we allowed to proceed forward? But this is all after the event has happened. So what the chief is talking about, and I love what K.O. is talking about, love and trying to get, like, how do we expose the members of the police agencies, the prosecutors, to more of the whole process as opposed to this conveyor belt piece. And in our office, this is what we've been able to do, right? Partnering with law enforcement, partnering with DOC, partnering across the board. We have prosecutors here who are coming in, and we are training them historically to be in that courtroom where the bad event has already happened, it's already been investigated, and we now have to prosecute. Recently, since in the last AG Jennings, we've been taking a dedicated effort to try and say, all right, look, what are we doing? It's not just prosecution. To be a prosecutor, to take an oath, because we take oaths, we have to talk about prevention, and we have to talk about reentry. What does that look like? Well, if we're going to reimagine things, let me give you an example. There was a young man who, a year ago or so, was arrested for resisting arrest following his high school graduation. And this made a lot of news because he was in the parking lot with his friends. They were in a car and they were peeling out in the parking lot in celebration. They were being knucklehead kids. As a dad, I get it, right? I get it. The officers, trying to maintain order and make sure that there was safety, people hanging out windows, told them to please stop and to leave. Now, we have an issue. We had 2 cars. One car got in the car and said, "Thank you, officer, have a good day." I don't know their names. The other young man, with no criminal history, made a mistake in that moment and decided to choose a different path. One that was steeped in anti-law enforcement or whatever was triggering him, with the police officers saying what they did in that moment, caused an interaction. Now, we have a teaching moment here, because what happened is the officers, thankfully, it just ended with hands-on and an arrest. But that young man spent his graduation night, because of a poor decision, in a cell as opposed to a party or with his family. Why do I bring this up? Because by the time it gets to me, that action has already happened. It's already occurred. And the question everybody in this room should be asking is, why did this young man with a 4.0 GPA, who's going to be a chemical engineer at his college, with no criminal history, make the decision to tell off the officer, peel away, and start putting that officer's life in potential danger? Now, however we answer that question, my next question to you all is, what can we do to try to prevent that moment from happening? You don't have to like the police officers to avoid this very dangerous situation that we find ourselves in America. I can't see everybody over there, so I apologize if I'm standing up. I'm old and I need to stretch a little bit too. But we are in a situation where as a country, these interactions with police officers are turning bad, regardless of the training of the officers. We're asking officers and probation officers to be mental health experts. We are asking them to be medical experts. We are asking them to be de-escalators, and we are asking them to do all of these things. And on the other hand, we have to ask this piece. How do we educate this piece? Because you don't have to like the cops to make sure that there's not a dangerous situation. So that's where I think prosecutors and police officers and the community can embrace a prevention programming meaningfully. Let's talk to driver's ed program like in the U.S. Attorney's Office when I was there, right? And they still have a program going on. Let's talk to the drivers, to talk to them about what their rights are. That's right, empower them. Know what they need to know. Explain what needs to happen. Why? Because we want them to be safe. You can be safe and not like the officers or not trust them, right? How do we get out of this interaction safely and quickly? These are the kinds of things that, like, we don't have to be liked every time that we're out in the community. We have to make sure that we're respected and that every piece of this is understood. And there's a role for the community and you all to also push that. Because if we're not safe, there's no love, right? And if we're not doing our primary job, right, which is safety, that's what I took an oath for. Right? So, a long-winded way. I'm sorry you gave the microphone to a lawyer. I stood up for you, but very passionate about this. And the good work that the police officers and the probation officers are doing is that we are focusing now and training our deputies to go on the prevention side before we get that case, right? And on the reentry side, joining and going to the Achievement Center, you know, where Winner's Circles or the Challenge Program, and interacting with prosecutors, our newest prosecutors, and individuals that are at high risk. Have a conversation with them. Understand where they're coming from. There's a lot more that we are in agreement with the justice system and what needs to change than meets the eye, right? So we all have our roles to play. Usually we're well down this line. We are stretching our folks to try to get them to think prevention and reentry, right? Because that's love, right? And the government is notoriously terrible with love, right? So, thank you.
Leave it to a litigator to stand up and do the whole thing. So as we're moving forward, let's try to, I'd like to start Q&A now if we could. that a possibility? Okay. All right.
Tell me, Dave, where you from? Melvin Mitchell. I just relocated from the DC area where I had the largest, I was with the largest AME church in the world. We had a prison ministry out of that church. And moving to Sussex County, I hooked up with this organization, the Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice, and we established the Returning Citizens Support Committee. And one of the first things I wanted to do was to look at legislation, because we've been talking about system change. And there's three pieces of legislation that are up for Delaware now. One is to abolish the death penalty. The other one is to give people with prison sentences access to scholarships. And the other one is prison reform. Now, my organization has been living at Legislative Hall, having lobby days, talking to legislators, and to no avail. What I've been told is that Delaware is in business for half of the year, and they close business, the legislature does, at the end of June. So when we talk about system change, how can we change the system if the legislation that we need to change the system, we can't get it passed? What I've been told is that we need to get all the legislators, okay? But I don't think that's realistic. So the question is, what can we do as a community when the legislation, we've got three, I thought these were pretty common sense bills coming from DC, you know, prison reform, abolish the death penalty, give inmates access to scholarships. So I thought this would be a cakewalk. But like I said earlier, my group has been living in Legislative Hall, doing lobby days, talking to legislators to no avail. So I guess I'm just opening the question, what can we do as a community when our legislators don't necessarily want to do what the community wants us to do?
Can I make a quick response to that? But I'm not going to be answering the question directly. I just want to say something about moving systems. You know, if we can do a study and do a cost-benefit analysis, like Joe was talking about, and then demonstrate to legislators how much money it saves to reinvest in people. Now, we're all, I think, pretty much kindred spirits here on the approach, but there are a lot of people that don't believe that. They're pretty punitive and hard-nosed about it. But they may respond if they know it's going to save lots of dollars, a lot of money. So if there's a way, there is a way, but if you have a study, a positive one, try to get a cost-benefit analysis done. But I didn't really answer your question.
I think this is a Sean question.
So I, coming from Virginia, and again, being the policy wonk up here for sure. So Virginia, we abolished the death penalty, first state in the South to abolish the death penalty in 2021. Federal Pell Grants are now coming available here for people that are incarcerated. That's something that is a really big deal. Virginia, we're exploring allowing our community colleges, which are regionally distributed, to be able to get into the prisons, and the Pell can actually cover a community college education in Virginia where it can't cover most four-year universities. So I would consider partnering with your community colleges and then advocating, because there's a lot of federal dollars available, and legislatures are going to chase federal dollars. You can count on that. And the last one, and then prison reform. Prison reform covers a lot of different things. Something that we recently moved forward in Virginia was creating independent oversight of our Department of Corrections. That's literally being stood up as we speak here in the next few weeks. But more directly to your question of how do you get legislators to listen to the community, right? And particularly when you have a part-time legislature, same thing in Virginia. I spend most of my time in people's offices and legislators' offices. I'm a lobbyist. I spend most of my time in the offices of people that don't agree with me. Far too often what I see in the advocacy community, in the places in the rooms that I've been in, is advocates tend to go into offices of people that agree with them, the people that they already have allied with them. And it's, quite frankly, oftentimes a waste of time. You need to be in the rooms where people don't agree with you. You need to be winning hearts and minds. You need to be seeking unlikely allies. Part of the reason we moved our state ombudsman, our independent oversight of the Department of Corrections forward, was because we went to the Correctional Officers Union and the Police Benevolent Association, who represent the correctional officers, and got them on board. Seek those unlikely allies. That's where I'd really be focusing my time and attention. And just to touch on one piece that he just mentioned about the cost savings. And in Virginia, we tried by making that argument of, oh, you're going to save all this money, you're going to save all this money. Virginians, I've had legislators say it's worth every dollar to incarcerate these people as long as we can. Virginia has a AAA bond rating, they don't care. They can get all the money that they want. So what we have started doing recently, and what has gotten traction, is talking about the revenue that's going to be generated by the people that are returning to the community. Rather than saying, oh, you're going to save money by incarcerating people, no. Let's talk about the money that the people returning home are going to be filling our labor gaps, filling our workforce development gaps, and going into the community, spending money in the community, and generating tax revenue for the Commonwealth. So those are some different arguments that you might be able to use, but the biggest piece of advice I would give is to spend most of your time and most of your energies on people that don't agree with you, because I think that is a gap that needs to be filled and is often neglected in the advocacy community in the rooms and the places where I've been working.
Thank you.
Words to live by.
And your name, where you from?
Yep, Stacy Inglis. I'm the executive director of the Delaware Safety Council. We were created in 1919, and this comment is to address the gentleman in the bow tie whose name I'm sorry. He's a very important person. Yes. Hi, Stan, Mr. Logan.
No.
Mr. Logan.
I wear the bow tie to distract everyone.
Understood. It's very nice.
It worked.
My comment regarding what is learned during defensive driving. Delaware Safety Council created the defensive driving courses in all of the Delaware schools back in 1935, and we're very proud as a state that all students in every Delaware school must go through defensive driving. That is not the case in every state. I'm very proud when we go around the country to different things that our state does do that. And in the defensive driving that we give through the Delaware Safety Council as well as through the schools, there's a lot of time spent on how to behave if you should unfortunately be pulled over, and what your rights are, and how the respectful manner of which you are to behave with the officer. So there is both videos that are shown, and that is gone over very strictly, both again in all of the schools, which have to be certified by the DMV, who we work very closely with. And then when we do our own defensive driving courses through the Delaware Safety Council, we cover that, and it is one of the very important areas that we cover.
Yeah.
Thank you. I know right here you've been really, really patient. What do you got written down? No, don't do that.
Hi, my name is Dawn Riley. I'm the founder and CEO of Domestic Violence Ambassadors. I do have a lot to say, but so I want to start off by saying a bundle of sticks is always going to be stronger than one. That's by a man named Kenyon. And I do have a question, and I hope it's not out of line, but I would like to know the races of the two children that got in trouble.
So there was one child, and he was not white, but I'm not sure he's African American. He was of brown. I'm not sure.
So then the next question would be, which one got in trouble?
Sorry, there was only one. If I misspoke, there was only one. There was one kid.
Okay,
There was one
I
kid.
misunderstood.
But I'm not trying to fight. I'm not trying to be
No, I
defensive in any way,
misunderstood.
shape, or form. Yep.
Yeah, no.
Yep.
The other question I have is, what processes and procedures do you have in place to decide which child or youth or individual is at high risk?
So processing your question here, there are lots of factors that go into when someone is determining whether or not someone is at high risk, right? It can be a variety of factors. There is everything from the court system, right? The JP courts have a particular model that they go through. It's a great question, right? There are certainly there's criminal history. There are factors that include everything from prior violence and you mentioned kids specifically, so I don't want to speak out of line. But if it's adults as well, what we get to know is that there's also gang or group affiliations, right? That are outwardly known, that are on record that this is who I associate with, and that there's a tremendous amount of violence in and around the area. These are all making things that I would say that are high or at risk individuals that doesn't necessarily make them bad, right? I don't want to translate that there, but if we're looking at a disproportionate amount of violence in a particular area, right? Those are some of the things that we have to, as a community, figure out ways to prevent, prosecute, and then once that happens, right? There's a re-entry piece that is also important.
into the next stage of life and be able to have that stuff.
So-
versus what's around them.
So for those who could not hear the question in the back, the question, if I got you right, has anyone thought about going to the very beginning to kind of figure out the source of what some of the high-risk factors are and trying to address that?
Right,
It-
from childhood up.
From childhood up, and that's a trauma-informed care type. It's a great point, and I would tell you that there are lots of people mission supportive of that front. But as a practical matter, some of the things that we are limited by, right, is that when a particular individual is in an episode, right, might be mentally health driven, but when they are a threat to society or they're a threat to the safety or the immediate safety of some victims, it's the police officers that are going to be called, right? And that's why good training and additional training that we're adapting to, that the chief was talking about, is important. That after they are arrested or the event has occurred, right, what are the options? Where should they be taken? Right? It should be more than just jail. I think I've heard that before, right? I mean, there are options, but some of the challenges from a prosecutor standpoint is by the time it gets to us, what are our choices, right? And I think those are the challenges that we're all mission supported to try and figure out. And I would encourage the more options that a police officer or a prosecutor has to come up with what's best for society, what's best for the whole, the better I think we all are. But thank you for that question.
Thank you. We have to move on. I appreciate that very much, though. What's your name? Where you from?
DOC, y'all.
Good afternoon. I actually have more of a suggestion versus a question. And I said it earlier, and I want to thank the organizers for today for inviting the Delaware Department of Correction to the conversation. We appreciate it. I wish we had a seat on the panel today for this afternoon session because we would have a lot to contribute. I'm just going to share my suggestion is I think it's extremely important when we're talking about reimagining justice and make sure that you have all of your stakeholders at that table and they're working together and not in silos. They're sharing information and they're using facts to drive their decisions and not feelings. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me in my mind is the term recidivism. And I hear that Virginia having the lowest recidivism rate. When we're comparing recidivism, I think it's important that we compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges. With Delaware being a unified system, if we separated our population like Virginia has their population separated, our recidivism rate would be much lower. We're under 10% and we have been under 10% for the past 2 years compared to Virginia's. So I think it's extremely important to share facts and make sure that we are all working together as a team, not in silos, and we allow the facts to drive our decisions and not feelings.
Appreciate it. Kerwin, how are we doing on time? We got
We have
another
5 more minutes, we can get one more.
All right, back to the bucket.
Where you from, good brother? Dawood Muhammad here speaking. Just a question, a simple question.
Post-incarceration syndrome.
Yeah, listen, I got a question. All right, so how do we, as a system, all right, let me put it that way. How does the system prepare a person that's been incarcerated 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 or more years to come out of here in this society and make a successful transition, in terms of, housing, employment, other resources that they need, that's required for them to get reacclimated back out here into society. Because I'm living proof, after serving 38 straight years in Smyrna, right here in Delaware. I was fortunate. I was one of the few out of the many that's out here now, right now. Within the last 10 years, you have at least 40, maybe 50 guys that's been released from Smyrna, right? After, serving that substantial amount of time. So can somebody up there answer that?
I'll take a small piece of it. What I see in most departments of corrections around the country is reentry resources being dedicated to people when they are maybe 2 years to 18 months away from the gate, sometimes even a more narrow window, sometimes even as little as 5 months from when people are getting to the gate. I know I had basically zero resources after serving 16 straight. It sounds like you spent several decades. We talked a lot about trauma today, and usually when people have gone to prison, they've dealt with a lifetime of trauma before they even got into the system. And then for a Department of Corrections to think that they're going to be, and then further traumatized while you spent 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years incarcerated, to think that we can undo decades and decades and decades or in a lifetime or generational trauma in a period of 18 months, 12 months, 6 months, I think is a short-sighted approach. So my piece would be that departments of corrections need to look at end-to-end services and starting reentry much sooner, years sooner, rather than just providing services on the back end. I know I was never eligible for, because I still had 10. I should still be in prison today. When I got pardoned by the government, I should still be incarcerated today. I had 10 more years to serve. I wasn't eligible for any programs when I received my pardon. So my suggestion would be departments need to start providing reentry services much sooner than they do.
Can I say something? Can I add something to that? That's my good brother right there, Dawood Muhammad. Spent a lot of time together with that brother. But this is a suggestion for the legislators, the stakeholders, and pretty much everyone in the room. There's a quote that says, if I always do what I always did, I'll always get what I always got. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And us being the first state, Delaware, I hear the sir, we talk about Virginia, they talk about other states. We are the first state. We should be an example of greatness. And everything, you know, I've been incarcerated up down Smyrna and things with docile as opposed to hostile. But they said it was hostile, so they built the shoe program. Kept a lot of brothers locked down for having an extra pair of sneakers or getting smart with an officer. We got away with that. And that traumatized thousands of brothers and sisters coming out of prison, keeping them in solitary confinement. They keep them out of prison when it's time to go. And then we're not dealing with the mental health stuff. Post-incarceration syndrome. And the cause and effect, it's a ripple effect. We gotta save our babies. All of us are in position to do so. But when are we gonna come together in solidarity and make some stuff happen? That's all about action. It's all about reimagining, but it's all about action and reaction and getting it done. I'm in the community every day, boots on the ground. Work at the school. I can't wait till the school's out so I can get back in the community so we can do this work.
Appreciate you, brother. Carol, I know we have to move on.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Thank you everyone for, especially this group here. Thank you so much for all this great information. We hope that it has been beneficial. We have Ms. Erin Haney, wants to come up and give the closing remarks for today.
Within the system, they need to be more rehabilitative versus punitive. Upon returning to society, there needs to be more programming in place to catch people day one